Welcome, everyone, to Mythstorie, a podcast about myths and history. I am one of your hosts, Bryant, with my permanent guest, Cammy. What up, Cammy?
Hello, Bryant. How are you?
I'm doing all right. How you been?
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are here on Mythstorie. Every week we take legends and myths or what have you. We'll give you the story, and then we like to talk a little bit about it. We got a straightforward one today. We're going, I can't really tell you what the origin is, the direct origin on this one is. So I can't say Greek, Roman, German, or whatever, but German is the best way. We're going with
European.
Yes, European for sure. Rumpelstiltskin is who we are talking about
That's
today.
his name.
You say it 5 times fast, you win a prize. I don't know what the prize is, but you get it. So we're going to talk about him today. Cammy's got a fun story. Everyone, you know the story. I know you know the story. It's a great story. I've seen 300 animated versions of it since my childhood. Did Disney do a straight up one? They've done.
I don't think so. But okay. So there is a Disney show called, I think it's called Once Upon a Time. It might just be called Once.
No, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, my mom and my sister and them were super into it. And when I was Googling stuff, it was it was talking about him. I should have guest starred my mom. We could have had a themed Once Upon a Time podcast 10 years after it's over. I don't know. It's not. Yeah, this is a cool one
Swan
too.
Queen.
Those are just words to me.
You don't know what that means. It's okay.
Yeah, really, this is a cool story, one that everyone's familiar with, but I don't really think we know a little bit more behind it. So it's going to be fun to discuss a little bit, but we'll jump straight into it. Cammy, let us know what you got for us.
Okay, sure. So I got it right here. Iona and Peter Opie's The Classic Fairy Tales. Our story begins with the boast of a miller who with pride saw his daughter as the most beautiful and fair woman in the land. Though she was quite a beauty, his tales of her exceeded the realm of the possible. He was boasting in town one day when the king was passing by, and he made the mistake of saying his daughter was so talented at weaving she could spin straw into gold. The king was a greedy man and kidnapped the daughter at once, demanding she spin gold for him, or he would punish her and her father for lying to a king. She was left alone in a room full of straw, and tried as she might, she could not even begin to thread the straw into the wheel, much less turn it into gold. She worked at it until midnight, but in her exhaustion, she began to cry. Just then a small creature, mostly a man, but different, came to her. He inquired to her plight and why she was crying. She told him about her boastful father and the demands of the king. The little creature told her not to worry and took the straw and threaded it into the spinning wheel and began making golden thread for her. She thanked him and gave him her ring as payment. He tipped his hat to her and vanished. When the doors opened that morning, the king was so impressed with the golden thread that he locked the woman in another, even larger room with more straw and made the same demands. That night she cried again, and the little man came back and spun the straw for her. She paid him with her necklace, and he tipped his hat to her and vanished. The king again was delighted with the thread he saw, and when he opened her door, he locked her up in an even bigger room. But this time, he did not threaten her or her father. He told her that she would become queen if she could turn all of the straw in this room to gold for him. She wasn't so keen on the offer. He had just threatened her family 2 nights in a row, but she knew that she had no other choice, so that night she cried too. And that night the little man came to her. This time he said, "You have given me all of your possessions worth my effort. If I am to spend for you, I will need something from you, but the price may be too high to pay." She told him she would give him anything. She just wanted to be out of this room and away from the king's demands. The little man said, "Very well, I am to have your firstborn." The woman gasped, but she knew she had to agree. So he spun for her all night and vanished in the morning. The king was so happy, he married the woman, and they lived rather happily for a few years, until they were ready to have children. The king did not understand why the queen was so hesitant to have an heir, and eventually he convinced her that all would be well with the child. She had a child with the king, and knew she had only a short amount of time to get out of the bargain. She cried one night, thinking about this awful deal she had made. The little creature came to her again and asked what was wrong, for he saw no straw. She told him that she had her firstborn, and then offered him gold and riches beyond the value of the gold he'd spun for her, but he refused, saying that the only way out of their bargain was to guess his real name. All this time the queen had never bothered to ask him his name, and he said she must give him one answer now, and if she was wrong, he would come back 2 more times to ask. If the third guess was wrong, her child would be his. So she guessed Tom as his name, but she was wrong, and the little man crawled out of her window. The next night he came back, and she guessed Rupert, but she was wrong again. He climbed out of her window, and this time she followed him, well behind so he would not see her. When he got into a clearing in the woods, where he had his hut and fire going, she heard him singing, "Merrily the feast I'll make, tomorrow I'll brew, tomorrow bake, merrily I'll dance and sing, for tomorrow will a stranger bring to me a feast. The little queen does not know that Rumpelstiltskin is my name." Hearing this, the queen ran back to the castle. The next night the creature came back and asked his name. The queen replied, "Rumpelstiltskin," and the creature became very angry with her. He screamed that she must have heard it from the witches and slammed his foot so hard when his feet hit the ground below the window that he fell into the earth, never to be seen again.
Yay! He's dead! Hooray!
Oh.
One of the variations I've seen on it, the ending, is that he hits his right foot so hard down it plants it, and then he kicks his left foot so hard it rips himself in half. What a way to go!
That's the German story for you.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. Yeah, this is pretty cool. It's such a well-known story, and it obviously became popular because of the Brothers Grimm. Well, it became kind of, I think, into the Western thought because of the Brothers Grimm. And these were in the early 19th century, 2 brothers that were really cool. I've never really looked into them. It wasn't Matt Damon and Heath Ledger, didn't they play them? Wasn't them?
No, I think Heath Ledger did. I don't know about Matt Damon.
Right. One of them. But they were German academics, is sort of how Wikipedia puts it. They were philologists and lexicographers. So they loved studying language from oral and written historical sources. The oral is the really important part here, because that's really where the bulk of all this comes from. And we've discussed this a lot, especially if you've listened to any episode that we've talked about Norse or Germanic based stories. They weren't so keen on writing it down. Many societies weren't keen on writing this stuff down until much later, but especially these guys. And the Rumpelstiltskin story obviously comes from oral retellings. One fun thing, when I was reading a little bit about the Brothers Grimm, because we haven't really talked about them, but I'm sure we will more. They actually sanitized, is the word Wikipedia uses. They sanitized the stories a little bit, so we know them as being grim, as grim is their name, and we know, like the old Red Riding Hood is like, she was viciously eviscerated and her guts were flown about. But obviously they changed that. But the Brothers Grimm even started that. So it started in the early,
so it could be worse, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it could have been like 1,000 times worse. So ripping himself in half was just like, that was PG for them. But it's really cool. And one thing that they studied was natural poetry instead of artistic poetry. And I thought that was a really interesting concept. And I think that's really where the modernization of fairy tales comes in. Practical, applicable things, things that people can touch. I think the German word was folk poetry, FOLK, like folk people, like tangible stuff. You don't have to be an educated person to really understand these stories and enjoy them, I think, too. And it is. Rumpelstiltskin's a really enjoyable story. The name, I mean, just hearing that name when you're a kid, you're like, that's amazing. Tell me more. and so that's my segue. The name, the space bar wasn't invented in Germany until very recently. And so they haven't been able to apply it to the language, because every word is just smushed together. They don't stop. They just blah. And Rumpelstiltskin is a combination of a bunch of words. Little, raft, stilt. is what it stands for, and it comes from Rumpel. It comes from a few things, but Rumpelstilts was a type of goblin, and like a stilt, like a wooden beam. So he's this little goblin-y dude, and he was known for making this like banging noise, like a pole hitting the ground or something like that. Which Rumpelstilts comes from Rumpelgeist or rattle ghost. So this rattling, this rumpling, and then if you Rumpelgeist, you can tie that in with poltergeist, the ghost that knocks off crap around your house. And the skin, the ending of it, in German it's like Sken or Ken, or Chen, and that was anglicized or English language modified to kin. So I think it's sort of like, I think you can kind of see where I'm going here with the etymology of it. So
so he's related to these.
Yeah, this thing. Yeah, exactly. So, but that's the word. It's just crazy long German. And I never thought of that when I was a kid. I never thought, wow, these crazy long German words. What's fun is so the name has been translated all over the world, and in many cases, it really holds true to like the Rumpelstiltskin. It's very recognizable in many different languages, especially if the closer you are to Germany, the more it stays the same. But in Russian, they have a very like familiar looking, it's in their alphabet, but it's pretty much like Rumpelstiltskin. Brazil does that as well. Lots of different Baltic countries, Polish, Finnish, they use some of those will do something kind of where it's more of like a translate, or they'll translate the word and then it'll kind of change. So like in Finnish, it looks like it's Titten Linter, and so they kind of like take the meaning and then retranslate it back and give him those names. So, but it's really cool because they translate what his name means, and then they keep that translation so you can understand what his name means in other languages, whether you're saying Rumpelstiltskin or a variation of that or not. But Russian is one cool one where it sounds like that and it is able to have that meaning, it looks like, as well. So this tale, though, the origin of the tale, we pretty much believed it to be in the 16th or 17th century is sort of the direct origin. But like I said, this was oral history. This isn't something that was written down, and it has, it's a fun lesson. We had a great show on Beauty and the Beast where I think we discussed this as well. That's probably one of the most comparable stories where Beauty and the Beast kind of came back later, and it's a pretty easy tale to understand, could exist a long time ago. What's really cool, though, is there was this group, there was a BBC News article, and there was a group of researchers at universities in Durham and Lisbon that actually believe that it is connected to the old Devil and the Smith story. Cammy, do you know what the Devil and the Smith story is?
Peter has brought this up before.
A lot. Yes.
And he wants to do it.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, so it's
that's all I know about it.
it's a Bronze Age story. It's one of the oldest stories where a guy sells his soul to the devil for stuff, and so it's a
like he met him at the crossroads and he can play the banjo now or whatever.
Pretty much the 6,000-year banjo.
The lyre.
But it's that classic tale. Yeah. It's that classic tale of giving up something for something little for now. And that's what Rumpelstiltskin does. So they believe that and kind of the reason why they believe this, they go through studying through Indo-European languages, and it's crazy. Do yourself a Proto-Indo-European. I've listened to some audiobooks that discuss the origins of this, and it's really wild where our languages come from and where they break and why they're so similar. And in the Proto-Indo-European, so this is kind of like the Asian area, like kind of think like how Russia is like half European, half Asia. That area, there were people there, they came up with languages, and then they split, they went down both sides. But it's really weird because words like Agni is used today, and ignite, and Agni is a word that's like insanely old. It means fire, and ignite, it's just crazy how it's magic, it's wild to me. I love this stuff. And that's sort of where I don't really want to the BBC article thankfully doesn't go too deep into it, but that's where they come up with this idea that it's connected to that, and it's sort of it's an evolution of that story in a way. So the blacksmith story, selling his soul, is definitely old. We've got old records of it, and it's the oral history of it is just as old. And so, but it looks like the Rumpelstiltskin part really didn't. I think saying it's as old as that is a bit of a stretch, especially because they didn't have weaving tool. It seems like it seems like the 15th and 16th century story, the oral history that was told then, is pretty comparable to what the Brothers Grimm had. They just made it a little more, palatable for the most part, and have it make sense. So there's another thing here too. My last little part is there's this guy, Johann Fischart, from 1545 to 1591. He was a German satirist and publicist, and he was really funny. So he wrote a lot of poetry and read a lot of poetry and published a lot of works, and he really had fun with the language. I'm getting like Shakespeare vibes from him, just because he had so much fun with the German language. And it is like, you can, there's like Schadenfreude, there's so many words that exist in German to explain feelings and ideas that we don't have really in English, that we can still describe, but it's just a one-liner. It's a really long one-liner, but it's something you can say. So he was someone who kind of did that, and he is connected as well to the Rumpelstiltskin word, specifically deriving it from one of his works. He refers to a kid's game named Rumpelstilt oder der Papart. So I don't know what that is. I wasn't really able to find anything on that, but I think it sounds like the pop art thing. I think it's kind of like a monkey chase the weasel kind of pop. That's what I think it is. So I think that again we have the blacksmith and the devil story, and then this is sort of like how language evolves and changes, just like how the Proto-Indo-European languages evolved into hundreds of languages across the globe and exist today. I think that's what Rumpelstiltskin is, and I think that's what many researchers would agree is Rumpelstiltskin is an evolution of this story, just with variances. Someone heard it, gave it their own spin on the story. And the last fun thing too, I know I just said that I had the last thing. There's actually something called the Rumpelstiltskin principle, and it is a psychological idea. Basically, where I'll kind of read verbatim here: the value and power of using personal names and titles, being established in psychology, management, teaching, and trial law. So this is the Rumpelstiltskin principle. So I get it's the idea of using people's titles and names, like how it affects people when you use their name. Because obviously, for Rumpelstiltskin, when he used his name, it didn't go so well. He cut himself in half. Out of spite and vitriol. So that's all I've got on this, but I thought it was just fantastic to hear about some of this stuff and connecting it to this thing that Peter has been egging us on to talk about. We really need to, because it's one of the oldest stories that we have, and it's obvious it has a huge impact on the world. So Cammy, that was a great rendition of it though. Really, I got Scheherazade vibes, where you're being captive by this king and you get married, and it's great. It's wonderful. It's all good. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about all that stuff that happened before. For those of you that don't know, Scheherazade, that's part of the 1001 or Arabian Nights. We've done a handful of episodes on those. Those are great. Those are another good example of old stories, sort of by the time someone decides, let's write it down, how it evolves, how it takes a new identity, but it still has its old roots. So I think that's all we've got today, Cammy. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Cammy, what do I need to say at the end? Can you help me?
Yeah, don't forget to rate, review, subscribe us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, whoever else lets you do that. I think that might be the only two. We are anywhere you get your podcast. So if you've gotten this far, though, you're obviously listening. Don't forget to find us on Twitter, Instagram, and our Facebook page. And you can find our merch at threadless.mythstorie.com. We also now have a Discord that Bryant set up, and I need to log on.
Yeah, we've got a link tree in the comments, so click that. It'll take you to everything as well. Nice and easy. Send us your myths suggestions too. If you've got something in your brain, if you got more Rumpelstiltskin,
Mythstorie with an IE at gmail.com.
let us know. All right, everyone. We will see you next time.
Oh.
Oh.